forget to bring a library book back, the last people you expect to start knocking on your door are the FBI. But this is basically the argument the Trump legal team is making tonight, comparing those top secret documents the former president kept to an overdue book. So how's that playing in court? We're live in West Palm Beach, where any minute we could see what a federal judge thinks. Plus, breaking in just the last few minutes, the longest sentence yet for a January 6th rioter. How many years one former cop will have to spend in prison? Coming up. And the White House says the primetime speech President Biden set to give in just a couple from hours from now is not a Trump speech. Okay, but it's not a Trump speech. We got a whole bunch of behind-the-scenes details on why the president is doing this now and remarks he's framing as a fight for the soul of the nation. Plus, the shock and the alarm bells screaming after a new report today showing the pandemic basically wiped out 2 decades of progress for kids in school. Why experts say this is a major wake-up call about the education gap in this country. And hundreds of firefighters on the scene tonight of a huge wildfire just north of L.A. With new details now on the PTSD some first responders say they're facing overall. Why they have no choice but to ask for help, they tell us in tonight's original. And we take you behind the scenes of an NBC News Now documentary airing tonight. You're going to get the backstory from one of our foreign correspondents on what moms in Ukraine are dealing with right now and how she found these incredible and gut-wrenching stories of loss and survival. Hey, I'm Hallie, and at some point soon, we don't know exactly when, but soon, we could get in writing ruling from a Florida federal judge on whether or not to appoint an independent third party to look into exactly which documents the FBI seized from former President Trump's Mar-a-Lago estate. So let's walk through the arguments we're hearing from both sides. Let me Vanna White you here, because on the left side is what you see from the Trump team, the arguments there. They say that a special master would restore trust with the DOJ. They say that's lacking right now. They say there's just no harm in having this so-called special master do a kind of check, that executive privilege is at play. On the right side, this is what the Justice Department is saying, that this is a case that at its core is about the ex-president unlawfully taking documents that are not his to take, and that he shouldn't get this so-called special master because, again, he is not the president right now. They're like, none of these records belong to him. They're also worried that if this special master is appointed, it could slow down their investigation. Take a look. You're going to see the Trump team lawyers walking out of court just this afternoon, including Chris Kise, the lawyer Mr. Trump just hired. He said, hey, this went well for us. It would perhaps be bigger news if he said it did not go well, right? I mean, that's kind of what you expect from the lawyer. All of this is ahead of a key federal grand jury appearance tomorrow from Mr. Trump's ex-White House counsel, Pat Cipollone, and Pat Philbin as part of the DOJ's investigation into the January 6th Capitol attack. This is according to a source familiar with the matter. Let me bring in Vaughn Hilliard, who is posted up outside the courtroom in West Palm Beach. And Vaughn, we know that the judge, we're just learning in the last couple minutes, is going to make public a more detailed list of some of the documents taken from Mar-a-Lago. Tell us about that.
Right, there's a lot happening in this hearing here, and Trump's team made the case to make public a more detailed list of the actual items and documents that were removed from Mar-a-Lago on August 8th. In large part, that's because they want to know what documents the FBI seized as part of this. Of course, there's been some confusion. You know, it was on June 3rd that a custodian on behalf of Donald Trump signed away that all of the appropriate documents had been surrendered over to the Department of Justice. We learned from that August 8th search warrant execution more than 2 months later that, in fact, that was not the case. The DOJ filing this week a report that said that there was double the number of classified documents that they recovered on August 8th compared to the number of documents turned over on June 3rd. So that is where we, the public, as well as Trump's team, as part of their own defense ability, are going to now expect to see a more detailed list of exactly what's to come. What we did not get from the end of the hearing before the judge put everybody into recess was whether a special master will be appointed or not. We may learn that by the end of the day today, this weekend, next week. It's not quite clear.
Yeah, in due course is what Judge Cannon said, right? Like, what's your due course? I don't know. Neither do you. Nobody does except for her here. So we know we're going to get this more detailed list, Vaughn. That's one thing we're waiting for. The other thing we're waiting for, as you've explained, is this ruling. And what was interesting was some of what we heard in court today with Mr. Trump's attorneys, for example, arguing that the whole temperature needed to be lowered, right? They're like, hey, lower the temperature here. They talked about how this was comparable to an overdue library book. The DOJ's argument is, hey, basically, we tried to negotiate with you, right, to get these documents back, but they're arguing that Mr. Trump's attorneys didn't come clean about what they actually had.
Right, and they're making the case that these are presidential records and personal records, and that under the Presidential Records Act that he has the right to hold on to these documents. And they push back on Nixon v. U.S. The Supreme Court unanimously ruled when Richard Nixon was the president that he had to surrender not only tapes but other materials because of a criminal investigation that simply using executive privilege did not warrant immunity from turning over the documents. They push back that that's limited case law and that these documents do not amount to a grand conspiracy here. At the same time, what we have learned is that individuals were visitors, I mean, by the account of Trump, one of Trump's own lawyers, that guests have frequented Mar-a-Lago and that have been in the proximity of these very documents here. But I think ultimately the question is, this investigation is not going away. But if the special master were to be appointed here, is there a crop of documents that currently investigators at the DOJ are looking at that perhaps will be taken out of the equation and cannot be accounted for as part of this greater investigation into Donald Trump and the records that he held onto at Mar-a-Lago?
Vaughn Hilliard live for us in West Palm Beach. Vaughn, thank you. And that's to say nothing of the fact that even though Mr. Trump has argued he declassified the documents, his lawyers have said nothing about that in legal proceedings. Let's talk more about a different investigation tangentially involving the former president, and that is January 6th, with several big updates on legal proceedings involving people who attacked the Capitol that day. And let me start with what is just coming into us. The longest sentence ever for somebody who's considered a January 6th rioter, an ex-NYPD cop getting 10 years behind bars. His name is Thomas Webster. I want you to look at the screen, however you're streaming this. Do you see the red circle there? Okay, so that's him. He's appearing to assault a federal officer with some kind of a weapon here. This ex-NYPD officer says in court he should have recognized as a former cop that police were overwhelmed. He says he can never look at his kids again. The judge, tough, man, saying his testimony was not credible. 10 years is what he got. Now, that's a lot, right? That's the most we've ever seen for a January 6th defendant, but it is still short of the 17 and a half years that the government wanted. There's that. We're going to talk more about that in a second. There's also Julian Cater, who's pleading guilty to 2 counts of assaulting law enforcement with bear spray. One of the officers he assaulted was the late Brian Sicknick, who died after the attack. But a medical examiner says the events of January 6th played a role in his death, which was of natural causes. And as that case wraps up, a new one is popping up down in Texas. Kelly Sorrell, the lawyer for the far-right Oath Keepers group, she's been arrested. She's facing federal charges for her role. Let me bring in Ryan Riley for us now. And let me take this in a couple of buckets, and let me start with Thomas Webster, this ex-New York police officer. Because literally as we were talking to Vaughn, I'm looking at my phone, and his lawyer is talking to members of the media outside the courtroom. Walk us through some of that and some of the other kind of damning things that were said in court today.
Yeah, so Thomas Webster effectively, I think, got this longest sentence in part because he clearly lied during his trial. He sort of crafted this narrative around the video and sort of created a story. He actually claimed that when you see that in that photo of him grabbing the police officer's mask, he claimed he did that because, he was just trying to show the officer his hands. And the jury clearly wasn't buying that. The judge didn't buy it. The prosecution didn't buy it. And that was, I think, an aggravating factor for the judge when it ultimately came time for sentencing, because the judge wasn't very happy with the testimony that he tried to put forth. Obviously, there's something sort of referred to as a trial penalty. You end up with a longer sentence if you go to trial, if you take your case before a jury, because that takes a lot of DOJ resources. And there's some complaints from defense attorneys about how harsh that penalty can be. But I think it's pretty clear here that this is a pretty strong message in a lot of these cases that it's not a good idea if there's overwhelming evidence against you to go to trial, A, and it's not a good idea to, B, lie on the stand during a trial if that's the path you choose to take, Hallie.
Former President Trump was out on the radio today suggesting that if he becomes president again, he's obviously speculated he's going to run, he's suggesting he may pardon some of the people who were convicted related to January 6th crimes. That would potentially include Thomas Webster here. Did Webster talk at all about Mr. Trump's culpability, the way that he viewed Mr. Trump's role in the attack, or did his lawyer get into that?
His lawyer did, referring to him as, falling for these lies. And actually, the prosecutor was pretty explicit here. Typically, in these cases, you'll hear prosecutors refer to maybe the former president or politicians is generally what they say when they're talking about these election lies. But they were very specific in this case. The federal prosecutor, the assistant U.S. attorney, was saying Trump's lies, regardless of whether or not Thomas Webster believed them, that wasn't to blame for everything that he did here. Because even if he fell for those lies, as he appeared to have done, he should have known you can't assault law enforcement officers. He should have known as a former cop just what a brutal attack that was and how tough things were for officers that day. It was a really tough situation that officers were facing on January 6th, and the prosecution argued to the judge, and the judge agreed that this was an instance where someone who obviously should have known better and shouldn't have engaged in that type of activity.
Let me just ask you before we go here, because I think the big headline, right, is that this is the longest sentence yet we have seen for one of these defendants. But it may not last that long because somebody else that we just talked about, the person who is accused of assaulting Brian Sicknick, could face up to 20 years, right?
That's right. But I think that actually, because he actually took a plea deal, it could end up being slightly under that. The guidelines could be slightly smaller than 10 years, actually.
Ryan Riley covering all of this for us tonight. Ryan, thank you. By the way, some other quick breaking news related to a Trump investigation. Senator Lindsey Graham will have to testify in a Georgia grand jury's investigation into alleged election interference by Mr. Trump and his allies in that state. But the federal judge is kind of limiting what exactly Graham can be asked, basically to try to keep the scope to Graham's alleged push to get the Georgia Secretary of State to throw out ballots in communication with the Trump campaign. Because of that limited ruling, the senator says he is pleased with the judge's decision, but plans to keep, his office says this, but plans to keep challenging his testimony via appeal. So in the next hour or so, right, keep in mind everything we've just talked about in the first 12 minutes of this show. This is the backdrop for a speech that President Biden will deliver tonight in prime time. He's going to touch down in Philadelphia soon. And it is not a Trump speech. That's what White House officials keep saying. It's not a Trump speech, but like it's kind of Trump adjacent, right? It's not a Trump speech, because what he's doing tonight, the president's going to walk this line between laying out an optimistic view of what's coming for this country while slamming what he is calling the extreme MAGA Republicans as a threat to democracy, a threat, he says, to the soul of America. There were a lot of choices that were specifically made about this speech. There were intentional choices made. It is going to be at Independence Hall in Philly, the birthplace of America, the place where President Biden started his campaign. This is an official event, right? A White House event. It's not just a political one. And what we're hearing is that he's going to tell Americans he serves all of us while being as blunt as possible in describing the threat he sees from Republicans. And Republicans, by the way, they're already coming out swinging ahead of the speech, with RNC Chairman Ronna McDaniel accusing Democrats of divisiveness, disgust, and hostility towards half the country. Mike Memoli, of course, is in Philadelphia for us. He would be in no other location. And Mike, there's a lot of details here. We laid it out at the top of this discussion, right? The backdrop of not just what we're seeing as far as developments related to what former President Trump did and did not do related to classified documents. On January 6th, for example, the Georgia investigation. There's, of course, the fact that there are election deniers who propagate his election lie that are on the cusp of winning office in races around the country. Like, this is the lens. The president may say it's not a Trump speech. His aides may say that. But that's the lens that this is happening, and you can't ignore the context.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Hallie. As the president is going to be soon making his way to one of the great cities in this country, he's going to be really laying out in stark terms this choice that is before the country in his view. And it's really hard to separate the fact that what we're seeing the president addressing of late is fueled by the fact that President Trump still remains a very real presence on the political scene. This is a speech White House officials have been telling me that he had long planned to give. This is sort of a midterm status report on the battle for the soul of the nation, which he really did launch here in Philadelphia at the beginning of his campaign. And he wants to set an optimistic tone, talk about some of the successes, but this really is an acknowledgement of what is a burden, one official told me, the president has come to feel, which is defeating Donald Donald Trump in 2020 was really just the first step, that restoring the norms, the traditions of this country really require two political parties, but the president hasn't seen that full-throated effort on the part of most Republicans to doing that Donald Trump really still does have a firm grip on that party. So he's going to talk about what he has done working with, and he'll make this distinction, mainstream Republicans, but he'll point to the fact that there are still these election deniers, that there are those who embrace political violence, who can put the progress he thinks he's made in 2 years at risk. And Hallie, we know what would happen if Republicans take back control of Congress, investigations of the current president in addition to the former president that are going on at the moment.
So Republicans in this pre-buttal that you've seen from some of them, including the top Republican in the House, Kevin McCarthy, are trying to say, hey, I think the argument is, look at the economy. Let's focus on things that Americans, they say, really care about, right? With polling showing that while threats to democracy are, according to our latest numbers, the #1 issue facing Americans, they say, the cost of living and jobs right up there behind it. How is the White House thinking about it? How is the president and his team thinking about kind of walking that line? Like, walking and chewing gum, meaning threats to democracy and also people's pocketbooks.
Well, Hallie, there's a reason that Ron Klain is tweeting almost on a daily basis the fact that gas prices have been on the decline now for a sustained period of time. The White House does think that this speech he's going to give tonight, this pillar of democracy at risk, informed, including by the perspective of historians who he's met with recently, is a major part of the election argument. But they say Biden himself is keenly attuned to the sensibilities of middle-class Americans who are just trying to get by, who are worried about the economy. Tomorrow is a big day. It's a jobs report day. The White House feels they have a strong economic case to make, especially about efforts they've made legislatively to try to ease the burden Americans feel. So they don't feel like the wind is completely at their back yet. They know there are still some headwinds, and the economy is an important part of the argument the president will also be making in Pennsylvania on Monday, on Labor Day as well.
Mike Memoli live for us in Philly. Mem, good to see you. I am sure we'll see you on this network later on tonight for that primetime speech. Let's take you now down to Jackson, Mississippi, because there is more and more frustration there, with federal and state officials saying they just don't have a good answer. They just don't have any answer on when people there can have safe water to drink. The governor today has announced water distribution sites, 7 of them, that should come online soon. With the National Guard, now they are giving out cases of water to like 150,000 people. These are the people who have no water pressure, who don't have water they can use to brush their teeth, for example, use to drink, obviously. It's all after flooding from those big storms earlier this week that messed up a key water treatment plant. And that facility has had problems for decades. The governor there even acknowledges it was only a matter of time before this thing failed. I want to bring in Morgan Chesky, who is on the ground right now. And it feels like so much the focus, Morgan, is on this water facility. The Jackson mayor says they're putting pumps in there, et cetera. I think bottom line, the question people have is, when is this going to get better for my life, right, if you're in Mississippi? And I'm looking at the people behind you, the National Guardsmen there. I mean, I'm sure they're slammed giving out water.
Yeah, Hallie, they absolutely are. And an important note here is that the people living in Jackson who rely on this water supply have been under a boil water notice for the past month because of issues related to the aging pipeline, the infrastructure that was pushed to the brink and then failed because of those record floods. So what's so interesting is when I speak to the folks who live here and ask them, man, how bad is this? They say, well, I've been boiling water for the last month. It's just been exacerbated by these floods. And now when they turn the faucet and they see that brown water come out, even though they're told they can technically bathe in it, as long as they keep their mouth closed, it's not something they want to have to deal with. And that's why we've been seeing folks show up to these National Guard sites that opened up today, this one of 7 of them. We were at another one earlier, and the string of cars, Hallie, just non-stop. And I think what's most disheartening of all is that when you speak to those who live here and even the officials and ask them, how much longer do you see this happening? There really isn't a clear timetable. Hallie?
I think it is so important, Morgan, the idea, and I've talked to folks in Jackson. I spoke with the FEMA administrator today, for example. You heard it even from officials in the state. This is a systemic issue. This is not a surprise. There have been concerns about this for decades. The system failed, right? Like, the system failed. And so I wonder if the awareness has been raised enough, because I think it's important to say this shouldn't happen in the capital of a city in the United States of America, right? In a state in this country. It shouldn't happen anywhere.
Absolutely goes unsaid. I did ask Governor Tate Reeves today if he feels like that the situation here in Jackson is just the tip of the iceberg, and if other areas across the state are potentially also at risk. He says that he has not been briefed as to any other water infrastructure being at risk of having a failure as colossal as this one, but he did make the point that the state environmental agency and the EPA do regular checks on these plants, and that this one plant in particular that did fail had been notified at least a couple times of areas of deficiencies prior to its failure as a result of this flood. Obviously, that's something that's going to be taken a much closer look at going forward as they try to figure out not only how to fix it, but how to make sure this doesn't happen again. Hallie?
Morgan Chesky, it's just people have to shower with their mouths closed. Is that still what they have to do? I mean, that's how serious this thing is? That's still in effect?
Yeah, it is. That was the word from officials today. And I do want you to hear what the mayor of Jackson had to say, if we have a quick sec, just because she kind of put this in perspective for everyone here on where things stand. When you see $1 billion as the cost to bring this system where it needs to be, is that feasible?
It's not feasible from the city alone. This is going to require not only the cooperation of the state, but the federal government in order to see the long-term fix, and that's what we're working towards.
And we do know that the director of FEMA will be in Jackson tomorrow, of course, discussing the long-term help that they'll be offering the residents here. And important to note, one of those ways they're helping will be potentially reimbursing individuals and or businesses that have had to incur extra costs as it relates to this ongoing crisis. Hallie?
Morgan Chesky, thank you. Morgan, we'll look for more of your reporting later on tonight on the network. Tonight, the Ukrainian president is criticizing nuclear inspectors for apparently not letting independent journalists go inside this Zaporizhzhia nuclear plant for a tour. He says, like they said they would do. Russia, of course, handling the territory by this nuclear plant. This is some of the video of those UN inspectors arriving today. They're trying to stop a possible disaster from happening in the middle of all the shelling in the region. And the latest attack near the plant happened just this morning, right? You had explosions at a village just about 3 miles away. The mayor there says it destroyed half the town. That delayed the inspectors getting to the plant. Both Russia and Ukraine have accused each other of the shelling near the facility. Megan Fitzgerald is live for us in Kyiv. And Megan, you had yet another reactor, the 5th reactor shut down today at this plant because of these issues, right? These explosions, this shelling. Tell us more about it and where this goes from here.
Yeah, Hallie, so the 5th reactor forced to shut down. Keep in mind there are 6. And just as you and I have been talking about since last week, that forced the power plant to run on these backup generators that run on diesel fuel. And the big question is how much diesel supply the Russians have left, because we just don't know. And that's why this is so concerning, because if you run out of diesel fuel for the backup generator, then you're close to this nuclear disaster. And of course, all of this preventing the inspectors from getting into the plant in a timely manner. That whole process was delayed. And so this is the concern. And this is why, thankfully, in the middle of the day today, we saw the 14 inspectors making their way inside that plant. But this is why their job is so critical. The mission at hand is to make sure that there isn't a nuclear disaster here. And they are taking a fine-tooth comb going through this plant and trying to make sure that they can avoid that, Hallie.
It's also, when you look at the timing of this bigger picture, Megan, today's the first day back at school for kids in Ukraine. How traumatizing that must be, right? Because classes are now in person for the first time since Russia invaded. You only have like half the schools, fewer than 60% of schools that are actually safe to open at this point.
Yeah, that's right, because schools aren't off the playing field here. We have seen Russia bombing schools. In fact, that just happened just this week and last week as well. A school and a sports facility were bombed in the Donbass region. And so, yeah, you're right. This is incredibly traumatic for kids. We went to a school yesterday. We had a chance to speak with parents. We had a chance to speak with teachers who are concerned about the trauma for kids. It's so traumatic that one woman told me that kids can can decipher the difference between a missile, a rocket, gunfire. They know these things because this is the reality of growing up and living in a war zone. But also, these schools can't open unless they have a bomb shelter. And so parents are now left with that difficult decision of, do I send my kid to school to try and maintain some sort of a normal life, or do I not? I want you to listen to what one woman told us.
Because when the air raid goes off, if we are at home, we live on the 17th floor, so we understood that we won't be going down every time it goes off. So we just stay at home. And in the kindergarten, when this air raid goes off, they go to the basement.
So here in Ukraine, parents are trying to decide what's safer, to keep their kids at home or to send them to school where they can get to a bomb shelter faster. Hallie, that's the reality here.
Can I ask you about something else, Megan? There's this report about the head of a Russian oil giant who criticized Putin's war in Ukraine, who died today after reportedly falling out of his hospital window. This is, I think, raising some eyebrows among observers of Vladimir Putin and of Moscow and the Kremlin. What else do we know?
Yeah, exactly. So we're talking about this guy who's 67 years old. According to Russian state media, he jumped to his death. He committed suicide. He had illnesses. He was in the hospital, and he jumped out the window. He also happened to be a critic of Russia's invasion in Ukraine, and he also happens to be among a number of businessmen that we have seen in Russia mysteriously taking their own life. Hallie.
Megan Fitzgerald, live for us in Kyiv. Megan, thank you so much. A little later in the show, by the way, we're talking with another one of our foreign correspondents, Molly Hunter, about her new documentary airing tonight on NBC News Now. It follows 5 women fighting to survive. And you are going to hear from Molly, not just about the story, but about what it was like to put it together, the reporter's perspective on the ground, how she got these interviews, how she got these women to talk to her, what it's been like for her. We're excited about that conversation. It's an important one and what we want to share with you later on. Also ahead on this show, if you're flying this weekend, you may notice a little something different at some airports. Why some pilots are going to be protesting, trying to send a message to their airlines, to their bosses. And importantly, what it means for your flight if you're traveling for Labor Day. And at long last, an edit button? Could it be? A new feature shaking up Twitter. Get ready. Pilots across the country are trying to take advantage of busy Labor Day weekend travel to make a statement. That's because off-duty pilots, but uniformed pilots from big airlines, Delta, United, JetBlue, Spirit, they're picketing today at 13 airports across the country. Now, this shouldn't interrupt any travel plans you may have, right? They are off-duty, but pilots are trying to send a message. They want to tell airlines it's time to prioritize passengers and to recognize the sacrifices pilots made during the pandemic. They also want these companies to fix some of the problems that are causing all of those delays and cancellations we keep telling you about. At the same time, you got 12.7 million Americans expected to fly somewhere over the course of the long weekend. That beats even pre-pandemic numbers. Kathy Park is at Chicago O'Hare Airport. So, Kathy, tell us more about what you're hearing from pilots on this, because one of the things that they're trying to get attention on are like those delays that we've been seeing that have been a big issue that we've covered here on the show.
Hallie, you're absolutely right. I mean, I am a correspondent. I travel all across the country, and I have fallen victim to a lot of these cancellations and delays. And these pilots are saying, look, they're also feeling the travel frustrations as well behind the scenes. They're being stretched thin because of staffing issues, so they're having to work longer hours. And now they're questioning the integrity and the safety of operations moving forward. So that's why we saw them in force today here at O'Hare. And as you mentioned, several big airports all across the country. They were off duty, so this didn't impact flights. However, they were trying to make a statement. They are trying to be united in their voice and hoping that their message today will eventually carry to the people at the top of these airlines. And keep in mind, a lot of these airlines right now are going through labor contract negotiations, Hallie.
There's also, I think, when you look at the Department of Transportation, what they're doing here, they're trying to, do a little "we feel your pain" thing. They just launched this new passenger website. Tell us more about that, because it seems to be about making amends to frustrated Americans who just want to get where they're going.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, you know, just to pull some data from the Department of Transportation, they said in the first 6 months of the year, 24% of flights were delayed. So we definitely felt the crunch, and we continue to feel the crunch when it comes to delays and cancellations. And we didn't really have to look far to hear from some fed-up passengers. Take a listen.
Just realize that you're just going to have to take a step back, maybe not make as much money, and do what you need to do for the general public who's flying.
So, Hallie, I do want to touch on some good news. And you talked about this dashboard, this portal that is now available to passengers now. So it's essentially a one-stop shop where passengers can visit, and it will show all the different cancellation and delay policies for a lot of the airlines. So just to give you an example, if an airline is delayed for 3 hours, they will be required to offer some sort of voucher for food. If a flight is canceled, a lot of these airlines will now be offering hotel vouchers. So it's essentially trying to put a little bit more pressure on these airlines, but also offer some transparency for these customers as well. Hallie?
Kathy Park, live for us there in Chicago. Kathy, thank you. Let's get you over to the 5 things our team thinks you should know about tonight. Number 1, today, the family of the unarmed black man killed by police while he was in bed says officers treated Donovan Lewis, in their words, like an animal. It comes after police in Columbus, Ohio, released body cam video of an officer shooting Lewis while serving a warrant. Police say it happened when Lewis appeared to raise his hand with something in it, but the family disputes that, and it turns out no weapons were found. The officer is on leave. Number 2, a new Pentagon report finds sexual assault reports in the military went up 13% last year, but they say the rate of service members who have come forward to make reports has gone down. The Army had more than a 25% jump in sex assaults, the biggest of any branch. Number 3, Up a Baby is recalling its Ridge jogging strollers after the company got a report of a child's fingertip being amputated. The child was not in the stroller while it was being used. So what happens? Well, the stroller's rear disc has an opening, and it can be dangerous if like a kid's finger gets caught inside while the stroller's moving. The company is giving out free replacement parts. But if you have this jogging stroller, something you should know. Number 4, some new results in from Alaska. Democrat Mary Peltola, we found out overnight, has defeated Republican Sarah Palin in a special election for a U.S. House seat. She is the first Alaska Native elected to Congress, with the results coming more than 2 weeks after the state used a new kind of voting system called ranked choice to figure out who will finish the term of Congressman Don Young, who passed away in March. Number 5, ever sent out a tweet, realized you had a typo and just had to leave it up there or else delete it? Well, Twitter is announcing today it is testing the long-awaited edit button. That's right. It means you can edit your tweets a few times in the 30 minutes right after it's sent out. If an edit is made, then the label shows up to make it clear to readers that the original post had been changed. My goodness, that is big Twitter news for the Twitterites out there. Some sort of shocking news today. New national test scores out today show the COVID pandemic has basically erased 2 decades of progress in elementary school students in their math and reading skills. For the first time ever, kids are doing worse in math, a 7-point drop on average. In reading, progress is the worst it's been in something like 3 decades, falling by 5 points, the most since 1990. I mean, look at these numbers here. Think about this. It's mostly 4th graders who get this test, which is, by the way, considered the gold standard of testing. Joining us now is Antonia Hilton. And to Antonia, we laid out kind of the key top-line numbers, which are startling. But what's also startling is the growing education gap between students in the top and the bottom percentiles. Yes, there was a decline everywhere, but the kids at the top were not impacted as badly, right, as the kids who are in that bottom percentile. Race, economic status, where you live, all play a part. Antonia appears to be perhaps muted. So we're going to see if she can hit her mute button and we can get her back. If not, we will try again in just 1 second. There she is. Go ahead, Antonia.
Hey, Hallie. Sorry about that.
Happens to us all.
The takeaway for me from this report is that while scores fell across the board,
what we see in that bottom 25th percentile is that kids' scores fell even further. And these are communities that represent the poorest students, kids that are more likely to be Black, Latino, immigrant communities, and schools that have long been underfunded in many cases. And, you know, when you look at the math scores, I think that's what's most alarming here. We see 5-point reduction for white students, but then for Black students, a 13-point reduction, for Hispanic students, 8. And you have to remember that this isn't just about, you know, which school districts went remote the longest, who was outside of the classroom. There were also districts around this country that faced problems like, how do we get kids access to the internet at home? How do our kids, you know, get tablets? Maybe they don't have a computer that they can borrow from their parents. And so there are districts where kids were not just remote, they actually for periods of time were unable to learn. And now we're looking at potentially years, you know, a generation's worth of impacts here, because these kids at that bottom 25th percentile are going to have to work that much harder to make up all this ground, Hallie.
Secretary Cardona is out with this new op-ed in USA Today about how to try to fix this, right? Even though some experts say this is just like you fix it by getting kids in the classroom. It's time, basically. How do kids catch up?
That's right. So he lays out in this op-ed, you know, a plan for federal investment that's going to help with all of that. And that looks like sending money so that schools can hire more tutors, more coaches for students. It means more time in the classroom. It means having to address the national teacher shortage. So there are actually high quality teachers in the classroom who can get students back up to their grade level. A lot of this is a lot more challenging than it sounds. And, you know, the real alarming takeaway from this, right, is that as kids in those upper percentiles start to catch up and make up for those 2-3 points, kids in the bottom part are going to take, you know, maybe years to catch up to where they should have been on.
Antonia Hilton, thank you very much for that breakdown. It's good to see you. A big wildfire north of LA in the middle of the worst heat wave of the year. Happening now. What we know about the route fire as flames shut down a busy interstate and force hundreds of people out of their homes. Plus, a deeper look at the physical and emotional toll on firefighters as they risk their lives to fight this kind of thing, and how many of them are now getting the help they need. So right now there's this wildfire just north of LA. They're calling it the route fire. It's more than 5,000 acres at this point. And it's coming as an extreme heat wave. The most intense of the year is taking over Southern California. Are you seeing some of this? According to the LA County Fire Department, this fire is only about 12% contained. A major interstate has shut down. Hundreds of people are out of their houses. More than 300 firefighters have been deployed to fight this thing. And it's happening as California is under an excessive heat warning, with this heat wave we've been talking about expected to last into next week. And this brings us to tonight's original, with in-depth reporting on a topic we've been keeping an eye on. We're talking about wildfires, right? Like the one in California right now. But there's an impact, right? Beyond just the physical that this is taking on those first responders who are trying to get a handle on these kinds of things, especially as wildfire seasons are getting longer and more intense. One study found around 20% of firefighters, 1 in 5, at some point in their career meet the criteria for PTSD. Look at this graph. That is way more than the 6-7% number from the general population. So some firefighters are telling us they've had no choice but to ask for help. Steve Patterson has the story.
For Reva Duncan, becoming a wildland firefighter felt like a calling.
I liked being able to see that what we were doing made a difference, you know, immediately.
But with over 3 decades on the job, it became challenging. Experts are saying climate change has made fire seasons longer and more intense.
We used to go 3-4 years without having a big fire season that, you know, caught the attention of the media, and we started to see that gap also closed.
How did that impact you personally?
It's physically and mentally demanding job.
Her mental health taking a hit, especially as fire chief in Northern California faced with death in a way she'd never seen before.
We had 3 horrendous years of fatalities. We had 2 helicopter crashes. All the pilots died. We had a burn-over fatality. A firefighter from Washington was killed on one of our fires. It was burned over. We had some non-line of duty deaths from a couple of our employees. And it took its toll on me and a lot of my coworkers.
The unmanaged stress manifesting in negative behavior.
I was drinking a lot more. I was drinking and driving. I was angry. My temper, I just could not control my temper. It was really difficult to be around.
Until she hit a breaking point.
I had a panic attack. And I hadn't had a panic attack, and I was driving, and that was pretty scary. And so that, I think, is what really got my attention. So I looked to find a trauma-trained clinician.
Riva was diagnosed with PTSD, and she's not alone.
And as these fires have gotten more intense, so too has the stress on the people fighting them. There was a 2019 survey polling about 2,600 wildland firefighters. Of that, about a third said they experienced some form of suicidal thinking, while about 40% said they had a colleague that died by suicide.
Professional firefighters do have higher rates of traumatic mental health problems from such big episodes as huge wildfires. They will have higher rates of PTSD.
Dr. David Eisenman of UCLA studies the effects of climate change on mental health.
On the one hand, you have people who really do have clinical depression, but then there's the more subtle experiences that last sometimes a lifetime, a level of anxiety or sadness or despair that doesn't quite meet, doctor's definition, a psychiatrist's definition of a mental health problem, but still negatively affects people's lives.
For Riva, therapy was a lifesaver. Not retired, she works as a peer supporter to help other firefighters work through their trauma, and it's helping her too.
You're volunteering to help out even after your career. Has it brought that love back for you?
That's a great question. I think it did bring that love back, but in a healthier way with better boundaries with that. I mean, the job is the job. It has its demands. But yeah, it definitely brought back the love. Yeah.
Steve is joining us now. Steve, I'm so glad that you are sharing this story with us. And one of the things that struck me, and I know we didn't air it in this piece, but I want you to talk about it, is how she told you, how women are such a tiny percentage of career firefighters here. Yeah. She talked about kind of the I think she said it's like a little bit of a macho culture, which I think plays into some people's experience dealing with mental health struggles.
That's directly what she told me. One of the things she said was how much of that macho culture is wildland firefighting. I mean, anywhere from about 85 to 90% of that workforce are men, right? And these are guys that take pride, as you know, Hallie, in like not washing their yellow Nomex, those jackets after a wildfire, almost as a badge of honor. So as a woman in that environment, a lot of them, certainly Riva felt like she had to be one of the toughest of the absolute tough, which made it much harder and much riskier and much more isolating to say, hey, I have a problem here. She says that she was just lucky enough to be far enough along in her career to kind of earn her stripes already to finally do that and then make it okay for other people to do that. And we're so happy that she did, of course. Hallie?
Steve Patterson, it's such important reporting. Thank you for bringing us that story. It's good to see you. Coming up, an unusual difference between the tennis balls used by the women and the men at the U.S. Open specifically. Why some women players say it's a problem that could mean more unforced errors, and whether that could change. We get into this controversy coming up. Plus, the new warning from Texas Governor Greg Abbott as more asylum seekers show up to a big U.S. city on buses coming from his state. That's next. NBC News covers hundreds of stories every day, and because you couldn't possibly read or watch or listen to them all, our bureau teams have done it for you. This is what they tell us is going down in their regions in a segment we call The Local. From our Northeast Bureau, one student died and another was hurt at a stabbing at a school in Jacksonville, North Carolina today. Police were called to Northside High School after this fight inside the school's common area, basically. The school resource officer, officials say, was on scene within 20 seconds and took one student into custody. Police say this is still an active and ongoing investigation. From our Midwest Bureau, the first group of asylum seekers arrived in Chicago this morning from Texas. Governor Abbott says he'll keep sending buses to Chicago, New York, and D.C. in protest over President Biden's border policies. Late this afternoon, Chicago Mayor Lori Lightfoot said the city will help provide legal help and resources to these migrants. And from our Southeast Bureau, a 10-foot 2-inch gator broke the Mississippi record for longest female alligator. She was captured and killed by 2 alligator hunters this week. Officials estimate she could be up to 75 to 100 years old. Pretty soon, we're going to see Serena Williams take the court again in New York, this time with sister Venus by her side. You guys, this is going to be a moment, right? It's going to be the first time the two of them have played together in a doubles match in the U.S. Open since 2014. Serena is also set to face Australia's Ajla Tomljanovic in a third-round matchup Friday after she beat the world's #2 tennis player in the world last night. But all of this excitement around Serena as she gets ready to retire, or as she calls it, evolve, is happening against the backdrop of this kind of controversy over tennis balls. You see them there. Some of the women players, they're not very happy with what the tournament uses. The U.S. Open is the only major where men and women use different balls. The women use regular duty tennis balls. They're thinner, they're lighter than the extra duty ones the men uses. The company that makes the ball says the regular balls are developed for softer surfaces like clay or indoor courts. They might fluff up more, which means they might be fast but are less durable. The world's top ranked women player, right? The world's #1 female player, Iga Swiatek, says the lighter balls could mean more unforced errors. Tennis Channel host Andrew Krasny joins us now to break it all down. And she is the one, Andrew, who sparked some of this controversy by pointing out what is this bizarro world where this is the only tournament where women are using a different ball. Okay, it feels to me like it would be like in the World Series if suddenly the baseball was heavier or lighter. It would throw off the players, of course. So what is this about?
Well, Hallie, it's actually through the whole U.S. Open Series in North America where they're using 2 different balls. So it's not just that one specific U.S. Open where they're getting a different ball, but it is through about 6 or 7 tournaments leading up to the U.S. Open. But the irony of this whole thing, Hallie, is that Iga Swiatek is the most mild-mannered, soft-spoken, most polite young lady you've ever seen in your whole life, and she has stirred up this controversy that has everybody talking.
What is the U.S. Tennis Association saying? Is this going to change, and why is it like this in the first place?
Well, first of all, the balls are the same size. They are. There's a different amount of felt on the ball. For someone like you and I, if we play recreational tennis,
would we notice the difference?
Not really. No.
I definitely would not, Andrew. There's no way I would, because I would have no concept of it. Yeah,
I wouldn't either. But when something gets in your head and you feel that it could have something to do with the way you're playing, it very well might be a difference. It is a lighter, slightly lighter ball, less felt. It's made for clay courts, but it's the same size ball. And some players, it all originated from a few years ago that they thought that it was causing some injuries, that it was a heavier ball. And some players didn't mind it at all. Hard hitters like Serena, Garbiñe Muguruza, you look at the power hitters, some of them haven't said anything at all. It's just in the last few weeks where Iga Swiatek, the #1 American, Jessie Pegula, has said that it's bothering her. So the USTA's stance is they go by what the tours recommend. So they're going to go back to the WTA, right? And they're going to go to the Players Council, which is constructed up of tennis players. And I'm sure it's going to be addressed sooner than any of us can imagine.
Let me ask you, so this is sort of the controversy that is bubbling up here, but the thing that is, I think, very cool that everybody's excited about is Venus and Serena tonight on the court together. And no matter what happens, whether they win or whether they lose, people say this all the time in sports, Andrew. Who cares if you win or lose? This is really that, right? Because Serena told a reporter last night after she won her singles match, she doesn't get to play like this. She said, I've had an X on my back since 1999. And I just wonder, what are you looking for tonight? Because I've said this before on this show. I will admit, Andrew, I don't watch tennis. I love Serena. I love Venus, but I will certainly be watching tonight. I will be watching tonight because it's so compelling. It's just a human story.
Hallie, look, they've won 3 gold medals. They've won 14 majors together, 2 U.S. Opens. There's no camaraderie like the Williams sisters and the love and respect for each other. The fact that Venus was thought to be the prodigy and Serena was the underdog who snuck into tournaments when she could, and then Serena became possibly the GOAT. Tonight's going to be very special. They've got a great chance. They're playing a Czech team. One of the girls is 17 years old, has never been on Arthur Ashe Stadium before. I think they've got a good chance with 28,000 people electrifying the stadium.
And lots watching at home. Andrew, thank you. It's good to see you. I'll watch more tennis if it means you won't be mad at me. I appreciate it.
Okay, I promise. I promise I won't be mad at you.
Coming up here on the show, we're taking you overseas because as we've been talking about the war in Ukraine, it is changing the life of every single person who lives in that country, and it is hitting parents especially hard. Coming up in our backstory, a behind-the-scenes look at how mothers are coping with a heartbreaking reality and grieving the loved ones they've lost. Time now to get the backstory, our behind-the-scenes look at how a story comes together and how it fits into our bigger picture. And tonight, it is about the war in Ukraine, a war that has transformed the lives of every single person who lives in that country, many struggling under unimaginable conditions and unimaginable grief. Like the women our Molly Hunter spoke with as part of an NBC News Now documentary airing tonight called Ukraine, A Mother's War. Molly met with 5 Ukrainian moms who are mourning the loved ones that they lost. They are trying to survive. They are trying to fight for their families. One woman telling Molly about her neighbor's only son who was shot in the back by Russian soldiers after asking for a cigarette. Listen.
Он пошел проведывать дом, потому что нет ничего. А его русские в спину стрельнули. Он пошел домой и приполз домой. И потом я, когда была у них, он говорит, мама, мне холодно.
You'll also hear the story of Elena, who's been able to trace the last few minutes of her husband's life step by step. Here's a bit of that in a clip you're seeing first on this show.
Є свідок, який проживає прямо в будинку на верхньому поверсі. Він все бачив з вікна.
So in February you had a clear view to the
Він
street from
стояв,
here.
і там все було видно. І він рахував ту техніку, і коли ворог побачив його, вони почали направляти на нього.
More tonight, obviously, when that doc airs, but Molly is joining us now. Molly, I am so glad that you're able to share this story with us, because this is something that you and your team have put together over the course of the last 6 months. As you visited this country, you talked to these women. How did you meet them? How did you get them to talk to you?
Hey, Hallie, and thanks so much for letting us kind of dive into it a little bit more with you. I'm really excited for your audience to kind of tune in later, but this is kind of the process stuff that I love having this conversation with you. We met these 2 women, for example, the ones that we just showed you, Marina, for example. That's in Borodyanka. It was one of the suburbs right around Kyiv. We were there a couple of days after the Russian occupying troops left those suburbs, and she was walking to a humanitarian aid center. She literally flagged down our car, Hallie, because she was hysterical. She hadn't seen anyone outside of her daughter for the 5 weeks of occupation, and her story just poured out. As you saw, she started talking to us before we could even kind of mic her up, before we could even turn on the camera, and she wanted to tell us everything because she was so worried that Russian troops would come back just a few days later and no one would hear this story. The other woman that we just met, Elena, who was telling me about her husband, she came over to us as well. So we were in Bucha. It is another one of those suburbs right outside of Kyiv that was occupied by Russian troops for 5 weeks. And she came up to my producer, Shira Pinson, and she said, I need to talk to you. I have this story to tell. What we found, Hallie, I didn't go looking necessarily for mothers. I didn't go looking for women. What we found in these areas that were under Russian occupation is that by the time we got there, it was so often the women who had survived, who were there, who wanted to talk to us, and also the women who were very, very vulnerable under occupation.
Yeah, and you talk about that vulnerability, Molly, and one thing I'm struck by, just even in these excerpts we've seen so far, this is raw and traumatic stuff. It is not easy for anybody to talk about, period, much less talk about with a foreigner who doesn't speak their language, who's got a camera with them.
Yeah. It's not an easy approach. Look, I'm very foreign. Very obviously, I don't speak Ukrainian. I don't speak Russian. I was lucky to have a really, really strong team with me. Hallie, I think we've talked about this over the course of my reporting in Ukraine before. I had a couple extra women on my team than I normally do sometimes. We had a women-heavy team, which made approaching other women much easier. I also had a partner in our local producer, Maria Ulyanovska, who I relied on tremendously, who I relied on to set the tone, who I would maybe, say, hey, should we approach this person? Should we push this person a little bit further? There are cues there in her native language, in her native culture that I'm not picking up on. So you have to establish that relationship, right, and really rely on your local partner.
What's the biggest thing you hope people come away with after tonight, Molly, after people watch this documentary? Like when you are, I know how much work goes into this. I know how much work you and your team have put into this. What do you want people to walk away from thinking about?
I want people to walk away thinking about how strong these women are. I know you talked about mourning. I know you talked about women and mothers kind of in your intro taking care of their families. But these are unbelievably strong women. And again, we didn't go looking necessarily for women or for mothers. As a female reporter, Hallie, as you know, you get access to places and to homes and to gardens and to spaces in life that not everyone is welcome in. So I want people to listen to their stories. It is all in Ukrainian, so really you are likely reading the subtitles, paying attention. I'm hoping that it's one of those subtitles films, Hallie, that you forget you don't speak the language and you want to turn up the volume because these women are so compelling.
Molly Hunter, our immense gratitude to you and to your team for all your hard work on this. We are lucky to have you and to have this documentary airing tonight right here on NBC News Now. Molly, thank you. That's 11 o'clock Eastern right here, however you're streaming it. That's a wrap for this hour. Before we go, quick breaking news. The FDA has just green light a new COVID booster. It still has one more step to go. Final approval from the CDC director. We'll talk more about that later on this channel. See you tomorrow.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Follow today's top stories and breaking news by downloading the NBC News app.